we're talking about forgiveness. So I guess the real question is, what is forgiveness? I mean, we can forget, but sometimes we can't forgive. So try to unpack for us that word forgiveness.
Sure. I think, for a lot of people, Father Chris, there's such a tremendous, really common myths that are on forgiveness. These are these myths that we kind of believe about forgiveness, and oftentimes it kind of shapes us in an unhealthy way in the way in which we look at forgiveness. So it makes it so unattainable. So what I want to be very clear is that um, forgiveness is not minimizing a mistake that someone has done to you. It's not letting them off the hook. It's not this idea that I'll only forgive if they forgive. And it's also a myth that oftentimes people have, is that it's just not fair. And the reality is that yes, it isn't fair. It isn't. It is recognizing that that hurt did happen and that did cut you like a knife. That betrayal did truly impact you. So I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that forgive the common myths that we have, that we're not in any way minimizing the mistake. We're just telling you that act like it didn't happen, because we recognize that we are shaped by our thoughts. And so no matter what we kind of willpower we tell ourselves, or to tell ourselves that, we can get past this, just to ignore it or forget about it, those thoughts keep reminding us whenever we're in a situation in which either we're around that person, or when we may be going through a difficult time and we're feeling the effects of what that hurt happened, that remind us of that. So what I oftentimes tell people is that forgiveness is not always about them. It is about our relationship with Him. So in other words, that the vertical relationship I have with Christ is much more important than my relationship with the person who's offended me. So if you think about it, if you think about like your soul, it's like a house. And every day we have thoughts, if you will, or things that or maybe people or things that come to our front door. So in this case, let's imagine for a moment the person or the people who have offended us. They're at the front door. We can't control that thought telling us that that they're there. Just like how Saint Paisios says that our thoughts are like airplanes, and they're constantly flying around, but that our soul is a runway, and we choose, as like the air traffic controllers, whether or not that thought lands on the runway of our soul. In the
That's
same
Paisios.
way,
That's
is that
Paisios.
what's that?
That was Saint Paisios said that.
Yes, Saint
Wow.
Paisios said that.
Wow.
And so we can't, and I love that, because I think it kind of helps us even understand just our thoughts, that in the reality is that we can't control them, that they're constantly flying around, but we choose to whether or not they want to land on the runway of our soul. And I think for us, the same is true with forgiveness, that imagine that person is at the front door, or that event is at the front door of your soul. You can choose whether or not to open the door to that thought, to that person. But once you open the door and that person is in your house, they have power in your life. So they have power to really, in many ways, impact your relationship, not only with them or with other people, but it impacts your relationship with Christ and ultimately your soul. So the big thing is that you almost have to be like one of those Ring doorbells, and you get the notification that someone's at the front door or there's movement at the front door. The choice that we make is whether or not we wish to open that door for them. And so that's the key, that I think understanding at least the myths about forgiveness, and then just trying to recognize that my vertical relationship with Him, is much more important than my relationship with them. And I don't need to let them have any more power in my life, because ultimately, and the Bible is very clear about this, is that when we don't forgive, God doesn't forgive. So it's one of the few things in Scripture that are conditional. Especially we find this in the Lord's Prayer, where again, out of all the things that Christ could mention in the Lord's Prayer, or sometimes called the daily prayer, He mentions forgiveness.